Hey everybody, it's Gil here with the sailing vessel Dream Chaser, and we are actually doing a boat repair video today. It's been a little while since we've done one of these. Not that we haven't been working on the boat, but I haven't been filming those quite as much. So this here is our large tender. We love this thing. It's got a 30 horse outboard on its center console. It's a really nice little dinghy. It's wonderful to have because you can, run around at good speeds. We can get up on a plane with 4 of us, no problem. But where the motor mounts on this, it started to rot. There's a wooden plate that fits right into this this fiberglass transom piece. So what we're doing is we've chiseled it out of here. I just went ahead and used a chisel and a crowbar and pried it out. And now I'm going to clean up the 5200 or epoxy, I'm not even sure what it is, along this outer edge. And then we're going to go ahead and make a new one of these out of Starboard. We'll put it back in here and we'll install the motor and everything back on it. We'll get our little tender up and running. And frankly, it's been sitting a little while, so I think I'm going to do some electrical work and rewire the whole thing. I'm going to do an upcoming video on that as well. So with this piece out, let's go ahead and start by getting this cleaned up a bit. I went ahead and ground all this right down to the fiberglass, so that way when I epoxy the new piece in, the Starboard, it's going to be good and solid and will essentially become part of this whole transom piece that bolts on. I will say it's interesting, I put the plug in here and didn't leave it out, and the boat was full of water. It's been draining for a good 5 minutes, but it worked out well. I was able to use that water to splash all the dust down off of most of this back part here. So we're all set. Let's go back, glue the pieces together. We'll get it trimmed to size. We'll come out here and fit this on and ultimately epoxy it and then through bolt it to put the motor back on. I'm sweaty and I'm full of fiberglass dust, so on home. The first step is going to be to go ahead and trace our pattern onto our wood. Remember, I need 1.5 inches thick from this transom piece I'm replacing. This one was made of plywood. Instead of doing that, I started thinking of other substances to use. One I chose was Starboard, right? Never rots, great alternative. I'll show you in a couple of minutes why that is not the right choice for this. It was really interesting and a bit of a learning for me. But I did cut it, I dry fit it, I know it's going to work. So I'm going to actually do this out of solid wood. So instead of using plywood, I actually have 3/4 inch thick spruce here. And I'm going to trace this pattern on here and we'll cut out the 2 pieces and then we'll glue them, we'll epoxy them together. Because I'm doing this out of wood, I will then go ahead and fiberglass the entire outer edge, basically encapsulating it in fiberglass. Then I'm going to drill oversized holes where the bolts go, and I'm going to fill those completely with epoxy. So anywhere that there's a through bolt, it is going to be 100% solid epoxy, so I shouldn't have to worry about water intrusion even if it were to leak in and get in around a bolt. That's the plan. So with that, let's get this traced and go on for it here. That piece, and now we'll just back it right up to that. Do the same thing again. All right, with my 2 patterns drawn, it's now just a matter of cutting this out. You could use a jigsaw, a circular saw, whatever sort of thing you wanted. You could just rough cut it and sand it down. I have a bandsaw, so I'm gonna just use the bandsaw. It should make quick order out of that. Over here, yeah, right here. Hey, do me a favor, if you like this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up, and if you want to see more like it, subscribe to the channel and click on that little bell notification so you get notified of new videos. Thanks. And with that, we have our 2 pieces cut. We'll get these epoxied together, and then I will sand the edges so this looks like one solid piece before we try to fiberglass over the whole thing. But that'll be my 1.5 inch thick transom piece. Now it's the funnel epoxy part. So nitrile gloves for sure. I am using West Systems epoxy. You can use whatever epoxy you're most comfortable with, or you can get locally. I like this stuff. It's available at West Marine stores, different company by the way, even though the name sounds the same. And with these pumps, it's easy to measure it, so you don't have to actually do any kind of measurement. What you basically do is 1 pump of each in equal parts gives me the amounts I need. So I'm going to do 2 pumps, I think, of resin and 2 pumps of hardener. That's probably going to be enough to coat the 2 mating sides and then use a little bit more to sort of epoxy them together. So I'm going to start here by just mixing this up. Now, when you mix epoxy, you must mix it for a full 60 seconds. We're doing just that. And we're going to paint each side with epoxy. And then as it begins to get tacky, I will add a little bit of a thickened epoxy like a glue sandwich the two sides together, and then I will clamp them. You can buy thickeners at the marine stores as well. I actually have sanded a little bit of fiberglass and a little bit of wood. I have that dust in here. I'm just going to use that to just thicken this up a little bit. And I don't need it real thick. It's just, I find it's a little easier when you're gluing something to spread it out in a thicker coat. Ideally, when you're making something to make like fillets or, you know, thickened epoxy corners, kind of want it about the consistency of somewhere between mayonnaise and peanut butter. I like to sort of spread it out with like a tongue depressor or something like that. There's also, you can use the edge of an old like loyalty card or credit card. Those work great. And now, just a matter of sandwiching these guys together and clamping them. And there we have it. We are clamped. I'm just going to leave this sitting out for about an hour or two, and then we will dry fit this into the actual transom, sand the edges so that everything is a very even. Remember, we have two pieces there. We want it to be perfectly even before we glass over it. So let me share a little bit about Starboard while we're waiting on this to dry. I went ahead and bought this Starboard and thought, what a great solution. It won't rot. I can take a 1/2-inch piece, cut 3 of them, sandwich them together just like we're doing with the wood. And after I did that, I should have looked this up prior, but I went online and it said, do not use glue or epoxy to adhere Starboard. I was a little surprised at that. I thought, let me actually try a test. I'll show you the result of that test in a minute. You'll see my disappointment in it. But at the end of the day, instead of using this, I decided to go back with wood and encase it in fiberglass. Here, let me show you this video as I went ahead and did a test on this after I cut all these, dry fit them in the transom, and then I thought, let me look online and see how to glue this stuff. And when I saw that, I was like, that can't be true. So I tested it. Check this out. Like I said, the instructions said not to use adhesive. I don't think that's probably not epoxy, but we'll see. We're gonna test it. But what I'm wanting to see is if this looks like it's made a good, solid. No. Wow. Look at that. It did not even stick to this stuff. Epoxy is not going to be the answer. Well, shit, that's disappointing. I took the clamps off of this. It's definitely adhered together. As I mentioned before, these are not 100% even where I glued the two pieces together. I did run over to the dinghy real quick. I dry fit it just to make sure it would fit in there. And I can see I need to take just a little bit off of this one side. And the reason I want to do this is I want to give myself about 1/4 of an inch or so of space between the new fiberglass I'm going to put on this and the exterior edge of that particular frame. And the reason I want to do that is because once I get this put in there, I want to be able to epoxy it with thickened epoxy in place and then fill the gap along the edge again with epoxy. So this essentially becomes one part of the transom and doesn't come out at all. I'm going to put this on the belt sander along these edges. I'm going to get this thing nice and smooth and kind of show you what it looks like up close. I just showed you a close-up of what this looks like after the edges have been sanded nice and smooth. I'm now going to go over to the sander real quick and I'm just going to round over these edges a little tiny bit. I'm not doing it a lot, and it's really for the purpose of making it a little bit easier to form the fiberglass around the sides of this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put a piece of fiberglass over the top, and then I'm going to drape it down the sides, and I'm just going to leave it hang there and not finish the bottom. Once it dries, I'll turn it over, I'll trim it along this edge, and then I'll do the same thing on the other side. So like most things with epoxy or polyester resin, it's really important that you do the proper surface preparation. I'm using a little bit of acetone here, and I'm just going to go ahead and wipe this wood down real good. I've already wiped it off to get the dust off of it. The nice thing about doing this with acetone is this will remove any sort of impurities that might be on it. Give a nice clean surface for our epoxy to stick to. So the first thing we want to do is cut out our fiberglass. So I'm just going to use this as a bit of a template for what I want it to be. We have our 2 pieces of mat cut. I cut one that was just slightly smaller than the curved edge of this, and I cut another one with notches in it so I can bend it over the side and go down. Now, when you do fiberglass, sometimes it's much easier to put them on in layers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to roll epoxy onto the wood. I'm then going to put this on a piece of plastic over here. You can use wax paper or plastic. I'm going to roll epoxy onto this, and then I'm going to put that second piece right on top of this and roll epoxy on that. What I want to do is moisten and get them all saturated. Typically when you're doing epoxy resin with fiberglass, you want to use equal amounts of weight of fiberglass mat along with the resin. So it's kind of an interesting mix. So let me go ahead and get my mix and we'll get going here. And like I've said before, you want to do this for a full 60 seconds. Pour this right into my rolling tray. And I went ahead and got just a very small 3-inch roller for this. Now we're going to go ahead and take our first piece of mat here. We're actually going to roll the epoxy resin right onto this here. Now the next step is to get this piece placed on it as well. Now I want to make sure that my cuts are right at the corners here. So I'm going to carefully use my thumb here to get it lined up. Now it's going to be important that I grab both of these pieces here and I line those up just where I want to. So I'm going to put my finger right on the edge of that so that when I lay it down I can pull it right to the spot where I want it. Alright, now when it's wet you can still move it around a bit, which is good news for us. That's what we're wanting to do. Now I'm going to use this, just push this right down to where we need it. You'll notice here as I'm going down these sides, I'm trying to get this to stick really well. I want to get this pushed down, and if I have to cut some of this glass where it's bunched up on the corners out, we absolutely will. We have our 2 layers of biaxial 1.5 ounce mat on here and draped down the sides. Now it's just a matter of letting this dry. We'll come back out. I'm just going to leave it like this for probably about another 30 minutes, then I'll ask Deb to help me carry this in so I don't move it much. We'll see you first thing in the morning, back on this.